All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going back in time to a world built entirely out of paper and ink. You know, an era way before infinite scrolling, when the biggest, most exciting adventures literally arrived on your doorstep. We're going to explore this totally unique literary universe that shaped millions of kids growing up in India during the 70s and 80s. So let's get into it.
You know, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? For millions of kids, books weren't just an option for entertainment. A lot of the time, they were the only option. Reading was like the original virtual reality. It wasn't passive at all. It was this active, all-consuming journey you went on entirely in your own head.
Okay, just picture this for a second. You wake up, not to a buzz from your phone, but to the sound of birds, maybe some distant temple bells, and then you hear it, the morning delivery. A newspaper for the grown-ups, sure, but for the kids, a stack of these vibrant, colorful magazines. That was your portal to other worlds, showing up right on the doorstep. It was a completely different sensory experience, right?
So here's the plan for our journey. First, we'll look at the lost world of reading itself. Then, we'll check out America's teenage detectives and Britain's boarding school escapes. After that, we dive into India's own illustrated revolution, and finally, we'll see how it all came together to create this printed dream world.
All right, first up, a lost world of reading, focusing on the sacred spaces. Because, where you did your reading, that was almost as important as what you were reading. These places weren't just buildings, they were absolute gateways. So, let's talk about the key places. First, you had the school library. In a really structured school day, this was your one moment of choice, of freedom. And because there weren't endless copies of every book, getting the one you really wanted, wow, that was a major win. That's this whole economy of scarcity idea in action. The thrill was in the chase. And then you had the British Council Library. Now this was something else. It felt like a sanctuary, a gateway to all this amazing Western literature. These were aspirational spaces, designed to make you feel like you were exploring the whole world.
Okay, so now let's dive into the books themselves. Our first stop, America's Teenage Detectives, which were all about modernity and autonomy. The US exported this incredibly powerful fantasy, the idea of teenage freedom, of being smart and capable, and it all came through these super popular mystery series.
And really, there were two main paths to justice, two flavors of detective stories that just dominated. On one side, you had the Hardy Boys. These guys were all about action, set in this kind of wholesome American suburbia. Then, you had the Three Investigators, and they were the complete opposite, all about intellectual deduction, brain over brawn, solving these weird atmospheric mysteries from their quirky base in California.
When you look at the Hardy Boys cases, this was serious stuff. We're talking counterfeiting rings, industrial espionage, kidnapping their friends. This wasn't kid stuff. And the appeal, the absolute hook, was that these two teenagers were constantly outsmarting the bad guys and, a lot of the time, the actual police. It's that classic perfect fantasy of kids being smarter and more capable than the adults.
But the Three Investigators, wow, they were on a whole other level of cool. Their whole thing was taking a mystery that seemed totally supernatural, a whispering mummy, a screaming clock, and just picking it apart with science and pure logic to show it was all a big, clever trick. And that was their real genius, right? They taught you how to think critically, to look for the real explanation. And let's be honest, their headquarters in a junkyard, that was literally every kid's dream clubhouse.
All right, let's cross the pond now to Britain's boarding school escapes, which were all about rules and rebellion. See, British Lit offered a totally different kind of fantasy. It wasn't about wide-open suburban freedom. It was about escaping into the superstructured but also hilariously chaotic world of the boarding school.
And at the heart of this world was the one and only Billy Bunter. This guy was the ultimate anti-hero. He was gluttonous, untruthful, but somehow you couldn't help but love him. His entire life was about two things: finding food and hoping for a postal order from home to pay his tuck shop debts. A postal order that, let's be real, was never going to show up. With his jam-stained face and those checkered trousers that were always about to explode, he was just this perfect carnival-like disruption of all that prim and proper school discipline.
Then you had the Jennings series, which pulled you in through its language. It was full of this amazing, totally specific slang. A wizard wheeze? That was a brilliant idea. A frantic bish? That was a terrible mistake. And learning all this slang, it was like being let in on a secret code. It made you feel like you were part of this exclusive, in-the-know club.
And of course, we absolutely have to talk about Enid Blyton's famous five. This was the gold standard of the perfect adventure team. The dynamic was just flawless. You had Julian, the responsible leader, Dick, the cheeky, brave one, and the sensitive but courageous one. And then there was George, or Georgina. She was the rebel, a fiery tomboy who completely rejected traditional gender roles, way ahead of her time. And we can't forget the fifth member, Timmy the dog, the loyal protector who was just as much a part of the team as anyone else.
So while all these kids were totally absorbed in these Western imports, something just as magical, just as revolutionary, was happening right there in India. This is India's illustrated revolution, the vernacular vanguard, a whole world of vibrant, hilarious, and culturally rich Hindi children's magazines was just exploding onto the scene.
So that morning delivery we talked about, it wasn't just bringing newspapers. It was bringing these absolute treasures, Lotpot, Champak, Nandan, Parag. And these magazines, they weren't just stories. They created an entire universe of characters that were deeply, instantly, recognizably Indian. And each one of these had its own unique vibe. In Lotpot, you had the iconic Modu and Patlu, basically an Indian Laurel and Hardy, fueled by slapstick and samosas. Champak was all about these gentle, moral fables with animal characters. Nandan was your source for incredible retellings of Indian mythology and Puranic tales, like the stories of Tenali Raman. And Parag was really interesting because it kind of grew up alongside its readers, eventually shifting its focus to more realistic stories about modern teenage life.
And get this, the local industry even started creating its own superheroes. Check out Angara, a bioengineered protector with bulletproof rhino skin, the eyes of an eagle, and the brain of a fox. I mean, how cool is that? It's this brilliant mix of the global superhero idea, but with a uniquely Indian ecological story at its heart.
So, what happens when you have these two massive streams of literature? These Western adventures on one side and these homegrown Indian fables on the other, all flowing into the minds of young readers at the exact same time. Well, that's what created the printed dream world, a truly hybrid imagination.
So, what was the legacy of this incredible printed world? What did it all add up to?
Well, here's the big takeaway. All of this reading fostered a truly unique hybrid imagination. Think about it. You had a whole generation of kids who could navigate global ideas of justice thanks to the Hardy Boys and who knew all the posh British slang from the Jennings books. But at the same time, they were completely rooted in local culture, laughing at the humor of Motu and Patlu and learning from the mythology of Tenali Raman. It was a world that celebrated the simple, tactile joy of print.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. In today's world of just infinite scrolling and endless content, have we lost the magic of the finite bookshelf? Have we lost that special something that came from having just a few precious books to read and reread? It's definitely something to think about.